Tackling concentrated poverty, it's one of the biggest challenges in public policy. It's not just one simple problem, right? It's more like a giant complex puzzle with all these different pieces that have to fit together. Welcome to our fun little study group for PP 5340, Introduction to Public Policy and Management. We're diving into the readings from Section 08, Poverty and Public Policy. And in this explainer, we're going to try and assemble 3 of those key puzzle pieces I just mentioned. We've got evidence, ethics, and action. We'll look at some really crucial research and policy to see exactly how they fit together to give us a much clearer picture of the whole thing. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to dig into the hard evidence, the geography of inequality. Then we'll shift gears and explore the ethical side of things. After that, we'll look at a real-world action plan, and finally, we'll tie it all together. Sound good? Let's go. Okay, first up, the evidence. You can't solve a problem if you don't really understand it, right? So we've got to start by grounding this whole conversation in some cold, hard data. So our first reading is this research paper, Disadvantaged Communities Have Lower Access to Urban Infrastructure. And it's by Nicoletti, Sirenko, and Verma. And what they do is give us this really data-driven look at how access to just basic essential services isn't the same for everyone. It creates what they call a geography of inequality. So a really key concept in this paper is something they call active accessibility. Now, this isn't just about whether, say, a doctor's office exists somewhere in the city. It's about whether you can actually get to it easily, on foot or by bike. Think about it. What good is a brand new grocery store if it's 2 miles away and you don't have a car to get there? And wow, this chart really shows you the problem in black and white. The researchers found this huge accessibility gap all across North American cities. What it boils down to is this. The most disadvantaged communities consistently have way less access to basic city infrastructure. And this isn't some random accident, you guys. It's a structural problem that's literally baked into the layout of our cities. And to put a real number on it, just look at Chicago. The study found that the neighborhoods where the most disadvantaged folks live are a staggering 27% less accessible than the neighborhoods of the least disadvantaged. Let that sink in. That's not a small gap. That is a massive, massive barrier to opportunity. Okay, so the data clearly shows us what the problem is. We see the gap, but that's really only half the story, isn't it? The next big question is, how should we think about this? What's the right way to respond? And that, my friends, brings us to the crucial ethical dimension of all of this. And for that piece of the puzzle, we're going to turn to our second reading. It's called Social Equity in Public Administration, A Call to Action by Blessett and her colleagues. And this article is so important because it doesn't just describe the problem. It gives us a really powerful ethical framework for how people in government, public administrators, should be actively working to fix it. Okay, so the article makes this really crucial distinction between 2 different ways to think about equity. On one side, you've got equality of opportunity. This is the idea of just removing barriers so everyone, in theory, has the same starting line. But then, on the other side, you've got equality of results, and this one's a bit different. It aims for specific outcomes, and it recognizes that, hey, maybe different people need different levels of support to actually get to the same finish line. And you can actually see this exact tension playing out in the history of U.S. policy. Back in the 60s, the big focus was on non-discrimination. That's your classic equality of opportunity. Then you get to the 70s and affirmative action, and the focus shifts to numerical goals. That's leaning more towards equality of results. And now, more recently, the big idea is diversity management, which is all about creating a more inclusive environment for everyone, so you can see how the approach has really evolved over time. The article kind of builds up to what it calls the Social Equity Manifesto. And the main point here is huge. It says that social equity isn't just some nice-to-have, some little side project. No, it has to be a foundational anchor for everything that happens in public administration. It's about wiping out inequalities of all kinds, using research to make sure we're actually making progress, and, importantly, recognizing that it's the folks on the ground, the practitioners, who are the ones that make it all happen. I really want to pause on this quote for a second because it's just so powerful. Social equity is a foundational anchor, not just a separate pillar of public administration. Think about what that means. It means it can't be an afterthought. It can't be a box you check. It has to be woven into the very DNA of how we design and deliver every single public service. All right, so we've got the evidence that shows us the problem, and we've got an ethical framework to guide our thinking. But what does this actually look like in the real world? What does it look like when a government tries to do something? let's check out a concrete example of policy in action. And that brings us to our final reading, Connecticut's Raise Bill 456. Now, this is an act to develop and implement 10-year plans to, get this, eradicate concentrated poverty. I mean, this is a seriously bold attempt to take these ideas and make them real. This is where the rubber really meets the road. What's cool about this bill is how specific it is. It targets what it calls concentrated poverty census tracts. And that's just a technical term for a neighborhood where 30% or more of the households are living below the federal poverty line. This lets them get super focused on the areas that need the most help. So how's it supposed to work? Well, the plan is pretty methodical. Step 1, set up a new state office to run the show. Step 2, develop a super detailed 10-year plan for each and every one of those targeted neighborhoods. Step 3, bring in local community groups to help out. Step 4, fund actual projects, things like housing, job training, and education. And the goal? It's crystal clear. Get the poverty rate in that neighborhood down to 20% or lower. It's ambitious for sure, but it's also totally measurable. And listen to this. They are putting some serious cash behind this plan. The bill authorizes up to $875 million in bonds. So this isn't just empty promises, you know? That is a huge financial commitment to actually back up these policy goals. Okay, now this part is absolutely fascinating. The bill includes this really powerful legal tool called a writ of mandamus. And here's what that means. If a government official isn't doing their job and following through on this plan, a resident from that neighborhood can literally sue them in court to force them to act. I mean, talk about accountability. That gives this whole plan some serious teeth. So let's recap. We've looked at the evidence, we've talked about the ethics, and we've seen a real plan of action. So the big question is, how do these 3 different pieces of the puzzle fit together? Let's connect the dots. Okay, so when you put it all together, you get what you could call a complete public policy loop. It's pretty neat. The research from Nicoletti and his team, that's our evidence. It tells us where to act by pointing out these inequalities. Then the work from Blessett and her team, that's our ethics. It tells us how to think about the problem using social equity as our North Star. And finally, that Connecticut bill, that's our action. It shows us one concrete example of what a government can actually try to do. Evidence, ethics, action. See how they connect? And all of this brings us to one last really big question. These readings show us we have the data to see the problem. We have the ethical frameworks to guide us. And we even have the policy tools to take action. So, what's missing? If we have all that, what is the final essential ingredient we need to actually turn all these great plans and principles into real, lasting social equity? Well, that's the part of the puzzle that's left for all of us to solve.